Welcome, everyone. Episode 23 of the Dolphins Make Me Cry podcast, and Week 18 is upon us, and the Dolphins, I don't know how, somehow are alive for the 7th seed, and if the Dolphins beat the Jets and the Broncos lose to the Chiefs in Denver, both playing at 425, the Dolphins somehow will end the season 9-8, and they will go to Buffalo as a 7th seed, playing the 2 seed Bills, and make the playoffs. Wow. You want to talk about everything breaking right for you last week? Last Saturday night, Broncos in that crazy game that they completely screwed up, where they could have, all they had to do was get a tie in overtime, and they end up losing. And then the Colts had to lose one of the last two. They end up losing to a Giant team that hasn't won a game at home. So maybe there's some fate on the Dolphins side. I don't know. I don't see it. But let's go into last week before we talk about this week. Dolphins with a win, 20-3 in Cleveland, just against a dreadful Cleveland team. They have a decent defense, but quarterback play and just the whole dynamic of that organization is they're more screwed up than we are, which is saying something. But Dolphins get a 20-3 victory. Tua, he was the big story going into the game. Last minute, doubtful. He had gotten hit on his hip, which was, come to find out, the same hip that he had hurt at Alabama many years ago, where he had to have surgery. He basically hurt it on a run in Houston, and then was on the injury report prior to the 49er game, played through it, had a decent game, wasn't anything spectacular, but they obviously won that game, and then, downgraded to doubtful, and Tua is a prideful guy, definitely wanted to play. I don't think he's milking anything, but team, said no, got to let it heal, and from what they're telling you, different spot, however, it's hurting his movement, mobility, and being able to do the things that he needs to do at the quarterback position. So you get Tyler Huntley. Now, I don't want to come off, negatively for Tyler Huntley. I think Tyler Huntley, for what he was thrown into this year, has done just about as good as he can do. He came into that Monday night Titan game, which when you look back at this season, and if you don't get into the playoffs, and if, even if you win and the Chiefs, don't win, what have you, you're going to look back at a couple games here. You're going to look back at the Titan Monday night, where you literally got Huntley off the street, off of the Tua injury, and then that was that big loss against a team that's won 3 games this year. The Colts game, which I was at in Indianapolis, that Huntley played decently. He did a layman's job. He had a great run game performance that game and had 2 big fumbles and basically lost to a subpar team, a game you should have had. And then the first game Tua came back, the Cardinal game. If you had one of those games, this would be a win and in game. If you had 2 of those games, you would probably be the 6 or the 7. You might be playing for the 5 right now. So, it is what it is. Revisionist history, and we all know, we've said it many times this season, a lot of what was screwed up about it was your lack of preparedness as an organization for the backup quarterback position. But that being said, Huntley came in that situation, which was impossible. He played a few games. He won the Patriot game. He did very little, and he got hurt in the Colts game. And then Tua has obviously been healthy up to this point. Huntley's been here. He's been in the system. He's an athletic guy. He's a runner, not a great passer. He was, on the Ravens practice squad. He was cut by the Browns, which is saying something, considering they've had, 400,000 quarterbacks since 1999. And he comes in last week, and give him credit, he was very efficient. He had 52 rushing yards. I think he was 22 of 26. He did enough. They had some good design plays for Tyreek, kind of, streaking down the field over the middle. They did enough, and they win the game 23. And the defense obviously did a hell of a job with a couple turnovers and, just really making DTR a quarterback he's not an NFL quarterback. He's a third string at best quarterback. Huntley did enough to win the game, and also, to his credit, again, the run game is literally non-existent. They had a stretch there of like 20 rushes for 22 yards. And it all goes back to me to the offensive line. So when you're looking at the fact that they won that game, it actually is even a little bit more impressive when you think about it, because Huntley did not have the run game that he had the 4 games that he played. They were averaging about 150 on the ground a game in those games, and he just really couldn't do really anything passing the ball. Whereas last week was kind of the opposite. He kind of had to, because there would have been no offense without the run game. So they get out of that game. You literally had all 3 of those things work to your favor to then bring you to Week 18 at MetLife against the Jets, a team that a few weeks back they basically lost the game themselves based on the fact that at the end of the game, all they had to do was basically go down 4 times and kick a field goal, and it would have pretty much milked the clock to where the Dolphins would have had very little time to do anything, and they would have had a 3-point lead. And then they screwed up on the kickoff, and then, bang, Dolphins come down and score. And Dolphins really stole the game. And there's a lot of worry in this game for me. Number one, with Huntley, because the run game is just it's dead. It's been dead for a while, and you can look at the O-line. Jackson has been out right tackle, and it's been horrendous since then, and I don't think he's the whole reason, but he's a big part. Armstead has literally been in and out of these games. He's gotten it out. I mean, God help him. And to me, he's a great guy. He's a great leader, and it's another conversation for another show. But like he needs to go. We can't play this game if you can never play. We just can't at this point. Maybe he retires. Who knows? But he's been gutting it out and trying to go, and he's pulling himself out of games. And who knows what's gonna be the case against Jets? I'm sure he'll try and gut it out. He has a big bonus potential. If he plays 70% of the snaps, which right now he's at that number. So I'm sure he's going to give it everything he's got to get, I think it's a $300,000 bonus. But at right tackle, Kendall Lamb was put on IR. So now you're going to have Jackson Carman. And literally when I picked the Dolphins to lose the Texan game, in addition to the fact that they never win big games, the number one reason was because you were telling me that you were going to have 2 backup tackles in the game, and that was with Tua. So now we're going to be in the same boat, most likely, or at a minimum, you're going to have Armstead banged up and Jackson Carman, who's basically a middle and, he's a, bottom level tackle against, the Jets front has always been pretty stout. They're obviously having a horrendous season, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And their defense has not been that good. But if I'm looking at it from a man-on-man, you got those 2 backup tackles in there, and then you got Eichenberg, who struggles at guard. You got Brewer, who does a good job at center. There's going to be some pushback, and if you have no run game in this game, what I really don't like is if you get an Aaron Rodgers who, in the Dolphin game particularly, it was the best game he probably played all year. He made plays, and a lot of them. If you play that game and you go behind, you're dead, because you're not going to have Tua to lay back on to come back. So that could be a very, very problematic. Now, everybody, I want to start actually here on Huntley first, and I want to talk about the Jets a little bit. So the thing that drives me nuts, and in fairness to the team, you don't see this, obviously they're not blasting this out, but you start seeing like reports of Dolphins interested in bringing him back as the backup. Dolphins, really, really interested in this. And you just say to yourself, do I want Huntley on the team next year? Sure. Do I want him to be the backup? No. Hell no. And I just love when, and other NFL teams do it too. There's like one good performance, and it's like, hey, like, let's sign the guy and let's give him money and make him the backup, and he's going to solve all the problems. Well, if he solved all the problems, and again, in fairness to him, he came in when he came in, but you played 4 games and you basically did nothing, and then you finally played a fairly efficient game last week against one of the worst teams in football. So everybody, like this organization, pump the brakes. I'd have him on the roster, but you better bring me in. I mean, I'd love to say Kirk Cousins. I don't know if that's feasible. However, he's going to be in a similar situation to what Russell Wilson was in, where he's going to get paid by Atlanta, and you're going to get him basically with them paying him. Now, the question is, and the problem would be, if there was any team that was going to give him a starting role, he's clearly going to take that. But if that isn't the case, which it might not be, and again, it's a quarterback-starved league. I'm sure if we analyze it, maybe you get a Carolina or a Raiders or a team like that would say you're going to be our starter or at least compete for it. And then, obviously the Dolphins would lose because you're going to be going with Tua, of course. But if you could get him to be Tua's backup, sign me up. And you're not going to have to pay him that much because, like I said, you're going to get him paid by Atlanta. So, obviously, another story for the Dolphins Make Me Cry draft edition or free agency edition. But pump the brakes on Tyler Huntley as your backup, okay? The guy was a practice squad player for a reason. Have him on the roster. All good. Bring him into camp. I don't think people are going to be knocking down the doors for him. And if they are, so be it. Not the answer. And anybody who thinks he is, you're lost. Decent in the fact he won a game. He won 2 games. I think he's been, 2 and 3? 2 and 4, whatever he is. I mean, it ain't good enough. Sorry to break it to you. And that's with a lot of offensive talent. So the other news of the week going into this game is obviously Tua. Tua, with this bad hip, he's not playing. He's listed as doubtful. They've strung this along all week long of saying, Huntley's going to get the major reps, and we're holding hope for Tua, but he's listed as doubtful. He's not playing, folks, okay? He's not. They're going to hold him out. Now, he did, which was very interesting, come out yesterday and say, if we make the playoffs, I am playing in the playoff game, which I thought was a little odd for him to be, saying that when you can't play now in a must-win game. And again, in fairness to Tua, he wants to play. I don't think the guy's a warrior. The guy, if we analyze Tua, I like Tua. He's a hot button topic type of quarterback. People either love him or they think he sucks. There's not a lot of gray area. I live in the gray area. He doesn't suck. He's a good NFL starting quarterback. He has a lot of skill set that is unique to him. Lefty, doesn't have the strongest arm, insanely accurate, efficient, but will not and has not taken games over, and he's not a closer type of a quarterback. He doesn't have, and he hasn't had, a killer instinct moment outside of the Baltimore game, which was insane a couple years ago, and the Dallas game last year. He has poor performances against top teams. He's very good against poor teams. He's clearly had a lot of talent around him. But the biggest indictment of building a team with Tua is, and it's Tannehill-esque, but it's a little different because different skill set. He needs to have a run game built around him, which he had last year. Lo and behold, why the offense was so good. A lot of idiots out there want to act like it was, hey, they're just passing the ball because they have Tyreek and Waddle. No, they ran to set up the pass, and they were the number 6 team in rushing last year. And the minute the rushing went away at the end of the year, lo and behold, your offense sucked. Plus, you started playing better teams, playoff teams, and you started playing games in the cold. And, wow, look at that. He's not as good. So you need to build enough around him. And most quarterbacks, you need to do that. Even Patrick Mahomes. Yes, is Patrick Mahomes going to win games and take you where you need to go? And is he going to elevate a middle and wide receiver core? Of course. He's going to do that. A Brady's going to do that. There's maybe 3 of those guys that are out there. Maybe 4 or 5. But Tua is not that guy. And if he doesn't have the line and he doesn't have the run game, and now a tight end, he's going to be middling at best. And then the biggest indictment of all of it is clear as day, the health. He had a major hip surgery in Alabama. A lot of GMs steered clear to draft him because of his body type. He's not a big guy. Works his ass off. He's changed his body multiple times. He put on weight last year. He took off weight this year. And then obviously with the concussions, that basically was his thing in the NFL. But the bottom line is you have a small body guy who's had injury history, and he plays reckless. He wants to win. He gives it his all, but he plays reckless. On the play, he got hurt in Houston. He dives head first on a run, on a rollout, and gets sandwiched in the middle and hit on his hip with a helmet. He goes for a tackle in the Rams game on an interception and gets kneed in the head after having multiple concussions. He doesn't know how to play smart. Like, Marino didn't play that way. Mahomes doesn't play that way. If Mahomes gets hurt, he rolls his ankle. He's not putting himself in harm's way. There's enough harm's way around you that you can't do anything about. Don't put yourself in more. So Tua, and then it comes into this next side, and this is a little bit more of an offseason conversation, but you paid him. So instead of exercising that fifth-year option, that was a big bone of contention at the end of last year and going into training camp, you paid him. So you're locked in as the Dolphins for 2 years with Tua, no ifs, ands, or buts. Unless he retires. You're stuck because you paid him. Now, could you imagine if you gave him the fifth-year option and then he had the season he had, nobody would be signing him right now. You'd get him probably at 25, 30 million tops on a 1 or 2 year deal, and the Dolphins would have had all the leverage. And I'm sorry, I know it's a quarterback-starved league. I highly doubt anybody else. Maybe there'd be a team out there, but based on the injury history, the concussions, I highly doubt he'd be getting anything more than that. And how that could change this team. Instead of paying him almost $50 million a year, you might be paying him half, and you'd have $25 million you could use for the rest of this roster that is sure as hell going to need it. So again, hindsight, and I get why they did it, but it's going to probably end up not being the right move, unfortunately. It'd be nice to be wrong. It'd be amazing if he comes out next year and he's healthy and he plays every game like he did last year, and they get better and they have a run game and they build the line more effectively and they can actually take it to where they want to go. And that is on the table. I think it is. But you've tied up a lot of money and a lot of resources in a guy who now 2 of the last 3 years is missing the final games of the season. And even though he says he'll play in a playoff game, and maybe he will, I don't know. It's certainly not a good long-term vision for the franchise. And it's going to be a problem. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what they do in the offseason with the draft, with a quarterback, with free agency. It's going to be very, very interesting. So that was kind of the big story of the week. The other story of the week is the Dolphins had no Pro Bowlers. And you see some of these Dolphin fans online sitting there crying and bitching. Okay, I'm sorry. You don't deserve any Pro Bowlers, okay? Are there some good players on this team? Are there some guys who had some really good years? Zach Sealer, Calais Campbell, Ramsey had a pretty good year. Tua in the games he played, very efficient, good numbers, even though they're a little skewed because he has the shortest yards per completion, even though he has the highest completion percentage, so it's a little fugazi. Nobody on this team deserved to be in a Pro Bowl, and the Pro Bowl is a complete waste of time. So honestly, who cares? So that being said, as we look at this game, number one, it's a big game. And the Dolphins, they traditionally don't win in big games. Now you're playing a poor opponent, and you're going to be playing in, not too cold, but it's going to be colder there. This is a tough one for me. I know looking at it on the surface, you say the Dolphins, they're playing well, and they're going into MetLife, and the Jets are dead, and the Jets quit. But this could very well be Aaron Rodgers' last game. I highly doubt he's going to go out the way he did last week. I don't see it. It's a tough spot. And at the end of the day, the other thing last week that you got away with is you had 12 penalties. They had 4 penalties on the opening drive, holdings, offsides. Also, McDaniel did not call a good game at all. He lost 2 challenges last week. It's very Mike McDaniel-esque. But Weaver, defensively, I think, who's under the radar, done a hell of a job, considering the defense, I believe, is ranked 8th, and they're 26th in takeaways and 26th in sacks, which is incredible that the defense has done this good of a job. And I think they're coming into their own a little bit. This could be that buzzsaw spot. And I will say this, no, irregardless of what's going to happen with the Broncos and the Chiefs, and that's a whole nother story. Right now, the Chiefs are stranded of getting to Denver. They could have to move that game. And the Broncos and the Chiefs are basically going to play most of their backups. They have the 1 seed locked up. So you're getting the Broncos at home in a must-win to get into the playoffs, basically playing Carson Wentz and the Chiefs backups. I find it hard to believe with a 10-point spread that the Chiefs are going to pull that off. So all the playoff talk could be up in smoke. Now, you want to talk about Nirvana? Here would be the Nirvana that it wouldn't make this team better when we, in hindsight, look back at 2024. But I would say this. If you were to win and somehow the Chiefs win and knock out the Broncos and you go to Buffalo and you knock off Buffalo, that with Tua, or anybody for that matter, that would be stunning. It would be amazing. It would be the reason why you believe in sports. I don't see it happening. I think, frankly, the Broncos are going to roll the Chiefs. But it's a very, very interesting spot. So, Steve Gio's Week 18 pick, could it be the last one of the year if the Dolphins don't make the playoffs in the league where they play for pay? MetLife Stadium, Dolphins, Jets, the rivalry that's been around forever, which the Dolphins have honestly owned in recent memory. Tyler Huntley starting against Aaron Rodgers in what could be Aaron Rodgers' last game. I think this is going to be a very, very tough game for the Dolphins because I do not believe that they will be able to run the ball as they have not, and the 2 backup tackles are going to hurt. I think defensively they'll be able to do some stuff. I think it's going to be very back and forth. I think the Dolphins might get down a little bit. And it's been a hard one for me to pick. I'm going to pick that the Jets win 24-21 on a last-second field goal, and Rodgers has a decent game, and he does not go out as a loser. Man, it hurts my soul to say that. I pray and beg that I'm wrong, and I hope Dolphins win, Chiefs win, and we're on our way to Buffalo, and we'll take our chances. But I don't see it. This team doesn't win enough big games and big moments, and you're already hamstrung with Huntley, the run game, and the O-line. So let's make it a great Week 18. It's been a great season. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Let's go Dolphins, make the playoffs, prove me wrong. We will see you hopefully next week.